Welcome to the Superstar Communicator podcast. My name is Susan Heaton-Wright, a leading impact, speaking and communications expert. My aim is to show you how to make an impact so you will be heard, listened to and respected for career success. Listen weekly to the podcast and go to our website, superstarcommunicator.com. Hello everybody, this is Susan Heaton-Wright. I welcome you today to the Superstar Communicator podcast. Before we start, I want to share with you some things that we are doing here at Superstar Communicator. First of all, every month we are doing a masterclass the last Tuesday in the month at 1 p.m. UK time for half an hour. I'm really fixed on the idea of having something very concise, structured, focused on a topic. Now, this is an evergreen podcast, so what you need to do in order to find out more is to go to superstarcommunicator.com/webinar-interest, and I will put this URL in the notes because I know that some people will want to find out more. Once you register there, I will make sure that you are always contacted when the next webinar is going to be. Now, as I speak, we have also already done one on virtual presentations, one on virtual meetings, and the next one is on the power of storytelling. So there's some really good content there. Don't forget to register. I will remind you at the end of this podcast as well. The second thing is that you can also grab your 10 top tips to being a superstar communicator. This is really a list of things for you to think about to make sure you're a superstar communicator. And I will put the link also in the notes. It's superstarcommunicator.com/10 So there's loads of information there. And I am really delighted because we've got another guest on today. This lady is called Eliza VanCort, and she is releasing a fantastic book which I have read, which is called A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space. She's a consultant, speaker, writer on communications, career and workplace issues, and women's empowerment specialist. She's the founder of the Actors Workshop of Ithaca, I hope I pronounced that correctly, a Cookhouse Fellow of Cornell University, and a member of Govern for America's League of Innovators. So let us all welcome Eliza VanCort. So welcome, Eliza. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've already read your book, The Woman's Guide to Claim Your Space. What prompted you to write it?
Oh boy, that's a question. My life. Really, it was a series of events. It was take my traumatic childhood, combine it with a head injury, and then have me go out as a speaker and have women follow me to the women's bathroom after my talks and ask questions they didn't want to ask in Q&A. And I thought, I've learned a lot in my life. And then there are so many things that we struggle with that we want to keep in the darkness, and because for good reason, we don't want pushback. And I thought, but we really need to take these conversations out of the darkness and into the sunlight. And so that was one of my main motivations for writing it. It really is me. It's my life and all I've learned in a book, and hopefully it will help people. That's the goal.
I'm absolutely certain it will help people. We are recording this on International Women's Day, ironically, although it won't be going out for a couple of months. And the hashtag is Choose to Challenge. And I would say that this is a book about choosing to challenge.
What do you see in that about choosing to challenge? I'm so curious, your interpretation of
Well,
that.
later on, you talk about owning the space, but
Hmm.
also challenging, in particular, men who mansplain or interrupt to
Hmm.
make sure that you still have a voice and a place at the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if we're going to grow as human beings, we need to challenge others who are trying to make us small. We want to challenge ourselves when we are making ourselves small, but
Yes,
then we also want to challenge ourselves not to make others small.
I agree.
So it's all of these different ways that we need to be challenging. So I love that. I absolutely love that.
And why do you think it's more difficult for women to raise their voices in business situations?
Well, women are taught since they're little girls to be good little girls. We're told to be nice, to, be polite, to don't raise your voice. And actually, they've done research that when little girls and little boys are little, when little boys interrupt, they are told stop interrupting at a much lower rate than little girls.
I
So what ends up happening is the girls start to talk and the boys start to talk and the girl shuts up. And so we've also been trained in all of these different things on how to accommodate other people. And so then suddenly you're put in a business situation and everyone's saying, oh, be small, be cute, be polite, be a nurturer. And then suddenly you're supposed to do this completely different thing. And it can be very hard to shift your orientation.
That's really, really interesting. Do you know, today I was meeting up with a client and we were talking about fight or flight. Do you know,
Mm,
when you're so shocked when somebody interrupts you or says something really rude. And there's a third part of that that they've identified, which is fawning. Have you come across this? No, I will send you the article because I know you will love it. But it's the idea that you're so shocked that you fawn and you're kind and nice to accommodate that person that's attacked you.
absolutely. I think also the other one is freeze.
Yes.
Freeze is the other one. I was actually just talking to a client as well who had been sexually harassed, and she just froze, absolutely froze. And I think that's where a lot of shame happens for women, because they've actually found that women who fight back in certain situations feel better, that their recovery is better because of the question of, well, why didn't you X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z? When really now we know from the trauma research that people freeze and fawn. I absolutely think that's true. When you look at the research out there, you actually find that when people have trauma, they will put themselves back in the position of the trauma to try to beat that thing that got them. And it never works. You just continue to be re-traumatized. And part of that is, fawning over the danger thing,
Yeah.
which is just, it's complex, but it's a real phenomena. And it's something that causes, I think, women a lot of shame unnecessarily.
What is your code of claiming space? Because I know you talked a lot about claiming space in business, but also in social life as well.
Hmm. Well, I mean, to claim space is simply to live the life of your choosing unapologetically and bravely. And that is what claiming space is. And in my book, I have 5 different ways that you can claim space. And I can go over those if you want.
Yeah, that would be great because obviously the people listening to our conversation haven't read the book yet.
Yes, yes, yes. So the 5 ways to claim space are: first, claim space with your body. So step into your power with your voice and your body. The next one is claim space collaboratively. So
Yes.
figure out who you want in your orbit, but also figure out who you don't. And I've always found that that's one of the things that frustrates me a lot when I hear about networking. People talk a lot about who to let in and how to bring people in, but they don't talk a lot about things like anti-mentors, who you want to push out.
Yeah.
So that's the second one. The next one is, and you'll find that I'm a complete nerd, so I do a lot of references to superheroes and sci-fi. So the third one is stop your emotional kryptonite. So it's stop this self-sabotaging patterns that we have, whether it's we're drawn to toxic relationships or we have imposter syndrome. Work on the things that bring you to your knees so that you remain standing tall. The fourth one is stop aggressors. So make sure that you learn how to shut down mansplaining, interruptions, microaggressions, all of those things that would make you small. You have the techniques to stop that. And you also know how to get allies to help you as well. And then finally, claim space united, which is really the intersectional piece of this. I always say, when we rise together, we rise so much higher. And historically, unfortunately, feminism in the United States has been seeped really in white supremacy. I mean, we have been getting things at the expense often of our brown and Black sisters. And we really are never going to rise as women until we understand that if we don't rise together, we're never going to rise. And so that was really important to me.
And before we started the conversation, we were just having a chat about that big point. That you do not focus on women per se. You really do put a lens on the fact that for our brown and Black sisters, it is a much more challenging life than ours.
Absolutely. I mean, I was talking to a girlfriend. I get very, I get verklempt when I talk about this, but I was talking to a girlfriend recently, and she's a Black woman. And she was saying, what do you feel when you know your son, when you knew you were going to have children? Because I have 2 biological sons. And I said, oh my God, I didn't know they were going to be boys, but when they came out and they're boys, I have 3 biological children and then my nephew. So 4 kids. And when my boys came out and they were boys, I just was like, oh, this is great. How beautiful. It was just, wonderful. And she said, when Black women find out they have boys, the first thought is, oh God, how am I going to keep this child safe? And I thought, she said, because we feel like our Black men are being hunted and they're incarcerated, mass incarceration. So the first thought you have is, oh, the world this young boy is going into. And I just thought, how different for us. We get the top of the privileged food chain, right? We get a white boy if you're a white woman. And then, Black women are dealing with worrying for the lives of their children. And I think we really need to remember it is there are things that intersect with womanhood. It's not just white womanhood, it's all womanhood.
Oh, that's broken my heart. It really has.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's very, very difficult, isn't it? And how can we support Black and brown, our Black and brown sisters?
Well, I think that
you and I are, call myself an ally. I'm trying my best. I make mistakes, and I'll hold my hand up to that when I make a mistake. And my friends that are from the BAME community, they will tell me if I've made a mistake, and I take it on board and don't make that mistake again. But how about you?
Well, that's huge, first of all. I mean, I have people often say to me, well, I know I'm not racist because none of my friends say that I ever say anything racist. And I always say, if people are not telling you that you're being racist, then they don't trust you, because trust me, as a white person, you're being racist once in a while. So, it's actually when someone trusts you enough to share that with you, that's a real sign that you're doing something right. But I would say that for me, the hardest thing is there's a woman, Dolly Cho, she actually has reviewed my book. She gave an endorsement. She has a wonderful book. She also has a TED on called Goodish. And she talks about the need to be a good person can actually get in the way of you doing the right thing, because it's so painful to think, oh gosh, I've hurt another human. So good-hearted people tend to deny their own racism sometimes because we just don't want to hurt people. So the first thing is to believe that, racism is in the air, just like sexism. We breathe it in, we're going to breathe it out sometimes. And when that happens, the key, and this was the hardest thing for me to learn, and of course I'm still learning it, but it's believing people. That's the first thing. Just believe that there is an experience out there that you don't have and that you will never understand. And so all you can do is take it on faith. When someone says this happened. And then secondly, don't get defensive and try to explain. Don't say, no. If those 2 things happen, I'll give you a funny story. I was talking to a friend, and she was a Black woman. And I said something, honestly, I don't remember what I said. I probably blocked it out because I was embarrassed, but I said something very clumsy. And she said, wow, that was really white of you. And I said, what? And I said, no. And she goes, I have to stop you because you're being really white right now. And I said, no, let me explain. And then she said, now you're being even whiter. and then she said, Eliza, when a Black woman trusts you enough to share her experience, your only job is to shut up and listen. Yeah. That's it. And for me, because of some of my childhood experiences, I really wanted to believe that I don't have racism. And the realization that really there's a whole world that you will never see and you will never understand, and to believe people, if we can just do that, I believe we'll be 90% of the way there, really.
Thank you for sharing that. Listeners, I'm sure that this is going to be one of the major takeaways from this podcast. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, the other thing we can do, of course, is make sure that when we're doing our movements, we're not talking just about the issues that white women face. There's a lot of talk, for example, of, women breaking the glass ceiling. And that's great. That's really important that we break the glass ceiling. But the glass ceiling is there because there aren't a lot of women who've butted up against that glass ceiling in many ways. It's a problem. There are millions of women in poverty. There are millions of women who in certain countries can't get an education at all, who have arranged marriages. There are women in this country who have been killed in their sleep in their beds by police officers, so Breonna Taylor, so we have these, we have to remember that when we talk about womanhood is not white womanhood, and that we really work on the other issues that intersect with our sisters as well. We don't just focus on the things that affect us immediately only. And I think that's incredibly important.
Thank you for sharing that. I love the idea of you saying that you should avoid those who make you small. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a massive message from that. But what happens if you happen to be in a team where people are making you feel small?
If you're in a workplace situation where somebody's making you feel small, I talk about the how. So how do you go about finding the tools? Because the book really is, you can read it from start to finish, and many people will want to do that. But there are some women who don't have time for that. They just don't. Their lives are too busy. But what they do need is certain skills in the book so they can go to the index and find those things. So that is kind of how you want to approach being made small, because everything is different for every woman. We all have different triggers. So what triggers you might not trigger someone else. So the first thing is to figure out, what are the things that make me feel small? There are universal things, but then there are things that are specific to each one of us. Once you figure that out, then you say, okay, what are the tools that I think will be most powerful and comfortable for me to use? And then you start using those tools. And one of the best ways to start figuring out your how do I do this, is to start getting in touch with your own safety scale. And what I mean by that is, when women walk in a room, we put ourselves on a scale, whether we know we are or not. On one side is complete physical danger, mortal physical danger. And the other side is absolute emotional safety. And very few of us, thank God, spend much time on the absolute mortal danger, although Black and brown women do have a greater probability. But we spend a lot of time navigating the middle, and a lot of time trying to push ourselves toward emotional safety. So what we want to figure out when we walk in a room is, where are we on the scale? What is happening to make us feel that way? Because often we just have this feeling, we don't know what it is. So identify, why do I feel this way? And then once you know the why, then you can do the how. This is how I'm going to approach this.
Brilliant. Now, you talked about trying to have the power of being the first. Now, it's likely that you and I are less likely to be the first person in our family to go to university, for example, or the first to run our own businesses in the family. But how can we achieve that? Can we create our own framework so we do become the first?
Well, I think the important thing is that what we really want to do more than anything is, when we're looking at the first, it's following what you care about. following your passion and not letting anyone tell you, no, I cannot do this. That is so important, because when we are following our passion, so much of the time when things are hard, they found that actually, let's say you want to go into STEM, for example. When things are really hard, what they have found is that women will call their parents, and their parents will say, well, maybe that's too hard for you.
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't do that. But when men call, they say, work harder. So we want to encourage our girls and our young women to work harder and believe that they can do whatever they want to do, and that it might be harder for them, but they just need to push through. And that is so critical.
That is a really, really good point. And for the people that are listening, remember that you need to support your girls, your daughters, your nieces, younger women that you might be mentoring in the same way that you would for men.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. We want to make sure, and there is this idea that women are, particularly white women, are weak. We're fragile flowers. And so what we want to make sure we're doing is not doing that to our women. Understand, we are strong and capable women. We can do what we want to do. And so we really want to make sure that when we're talking to our girls, we are not trying to protect them from suffering if something's hard. And I actually think that suffering is not that bad of a thing. I think suffering is actually an important part of life. And
Yes.
when we try to keep people from suffering, often we're keeping them from their dreams, rather than saying, you might suffer a little bit to get here, and that's part of your journey, and that's okay.
I don't know if you are the generation, I certainly was, when we were told, oh, don't be a doctor, be a nurse, because that will fit in with your family far more, even
That's
if
right.
you're an A grade person.
Right.
And now we have the next generation, and it's fantastic that we are able to say to young girls, yeah, try and be a doctor.
That's
What's
right.
your opinion about that? How things have moved on since, we were in that situation of choosing a career?
Yeah, it's really interesting. We are moving into careers that we have not done before. But what's really fascinating, and I don't know how it's been in the last 2 to 3 years, but the research from a couple of years ago has shown that when women go into professions that are traditionally male professions, the pay grade of that profession goes down.
Yes.
Which is just boink. So that's really, to me, that is some fascinating stuff right there. But I guess what I would say is that we are moving in that direction, and I think that's wonderful. But really, it has been largely certain women, privileged women, white women,
You're
women from
right.
multi-generations of families, all of those things. And that is the part that we need to work on, because white women definitely are getting more and more opportunities, and our brown and black sisters definitely have it harder. And the stories I hear from the women who are CEOs and professors would make your skin crawl. I mean, it's just the amount of constant, unrelenting, everyday pushback they're getting. So they're spending so much time navigating that they often don't have the bandwidth to do all the things that they need to do to get to the next level.
Yeah. And what about less privileged white women? Because that's another group
Mm-hmm.
that might be underachieving.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, this is a huge problem. Is cyclical poverty, intergenerational poverty is huge, and white women in rural areas often get stuck in a cycle of poverty. I learned about this. I have a really interesting story about this. When I was younger, right out of college, I took a year off in between college and moving on to my next adventure. And I went to work as a youth worker in the Big Brother, Big Sister program. And one day, one of the other youth workers said, hey, can you come with me? I want you to come with us today while we do this other program, because I didn't have something to do, whatever. She said she wanted me to, now I know why she did it. At the time, I didn't understand. So I said, sure. So I got in the car, we pull up to a junkyard. And I'm like, oh, why are we stopping at a junkyard? And a kid comes out of a structure in the junkyard. And I realized that it's a dilapidated old trailer. So I'm already just like, my mind is completely blown. The kid gets into the bus with us. It's a little bus. and picking up all these kids to go to a program. And the youth worker says to him, so do you have another poem for us this week? And he goes, yeah. And I said, oh, she said, oh, can we hear it? And he speaks it. And it starts with, I live in the sticks. I'll never forget it. And it was this beautiful poem that I love poems. Maya Angelou's poems kind of got me through middle school. And hearing him, I thought, this is as good as the best poet you would ever hear. Like, it's so brilliant. And when he got out of the bus, I turned to her and I said, he's going to make it. He's going to make it. And she said, Eliza, I have been working with his family for 3 generations. His mother was just as smart as he was. The grandmother was just as smart as she was. He's not going anywhere. And my heart just went, oh, it just hit me. And that's, that poverty, if you look at that, think about, anytime we have one group that has an advantage over the others in terms of getting into the marketplace of ideas, we lose little boys like that, and little girls like that who have these beautiful ideas and we'll never hear them. And that's really, as an artist, that's part of where my passion is I just want, part of my book is I just want to play a tiny, teeny little part in making sure everyone is heard. Because what a better world we could live in if that young man had a book of poetry about growing up in that place,
Absolutely. What we would learn from that.
Yes, just incredible. And so, yeah, I think that is a big problem. I will pivot on that a little, though, which is that, the way I think about these isms that we carry and what makes things easier for somebody and harder for somebody else is, when you're born, you're given a little backpack. And that little backpack and then in the backpack, they stick stuff. So, for example, they have found that attractive people have an easier time. And that if you're very, 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 if you're off the bell curve of what would be considered unattractive, and there are things like your eyes are closed, things like that, you actually have an incredibly hard time getting hired for jobs. So, let's put that in there. And then you put race or you put whatever. And then you imagine 2 people walking up a hill. And let's say one is Black and first generation, one is white and first generation. And somehow that white kid and that Black kid had somebody invest in them and they were able to break that cycle of poverty. So they're walking up the hill and it's steep for everybody and it's hard for everybody. And then some dude with a scooter comes by and just blows by them. And they're both thinking, this is totally unfair. Eventually they get to a point in their career where the white guy takes out the poverty brick. And the Black guy takes out the poverty brick, but the Black guy still has the I am Black in the world brick. And the problem is he starts to fall behind, but the white person is looking up at that guy in the scooter who was born with the silver spoon in his mouth saying, wait a minute, this is totally unfair. And he's tired because life is hard and he's still going up the hill and he doesn't have the energy to look behind. And I think because it just seems so unfair. So you're looking ahead and not behind. And part of what our job is, look behind you. Even when you're tired, there are other people carrying more. So while I think poverty with white people is a gigantic problem, a huge problem, once you break through that, if you're lucky enough to get through that, once you integrate into that world, you're still going to have a lot of imposter syndrome. You're still going to face a lot of things, but it will not be, you still will not have to deal with the race. And so that's sort of the thing to keep in mind, I think, when you're thinking about these issues, is it's easier to assimilate and hide some of these things that people judge than others.
And what would your 3 top tips, because I always ask 3 people, 3 top tips of 3 things that you would ask my listeners or your readers to take from your book?
Well, the first is the most important, I think, which is believe you have the right to claim space. Believe it, because so much of the time we're taught that we don't. And if we don't believe it, it doesn't matter how many tools we have, we won't use them. So believe you have the right to claim space. You're 50% of the population. The second one would be watch yourself when you are safe, when you're with the people you love the most, and see how you're communicating and see, are you being received the way you want to? And if you're not, watch the times when that's happening. You may find patterns. Oh, okay, I speak really fast, and when I speak fast, people tune out. Oh, I let people interrupt me, even in the safest situation. So watch that. That can help you shore up your baseline of your communication, is because you got to start when you're in your safest place possible. Then once you've gotten your baseline to where you want it to be, then start watching yourself. How do you respond when you're under duress with your communication? And once you figure that out, you can then take those tools. And the way I recommend people do it, take one tool at a time. Try it for a day, see if it works. So for example, let's say I have a dude named Chad who's constantly mansplaining me. And I say, today I'm going to not let Chad mansplain me. So he starts to mansplain me, and I use a technique where I ask a question. Let's say it doesn't work. I try it several times, doesn't work. I'm not going to start doing other things that day. I'm just going to go home and say, okay, that didn't work. Then think about other tools that might work. Try that the next time. So don't try to do it all at once. Don't try to be perfect. Just try to go in there and really methodically get your, as I did after my accident, build your communication back up to where you want it to be, brick by brick.
Fantastic tips. Now, I'm sure that there are going to be people that would love to buy your book or know more about you. Could you share that with the listeners?
Absolutely. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have people reaching out and asking questions about communication all the time, and I love, love, love it. Now, I don't always get back to people right away, so don't be shy. Claim some space and ask me twice. If I don't get back to you, it just means it's a busy day. But I love when people connect with me on LinkedIn and ask questions. And then my website's going to be very pretty soon, but it's still kind of a little tired right now. It's about to get a makeover. But you can also go onto my website. I send out bi-weekly newsletters, and they're not, by thing. They're, here's a tip here, or I did a podcast and I think this discussion might be interesting, or let me tell you about this new research that came out, you might find it interesting. So if you're really interested in the intersection of women and communication, you can join our community of space claimers.
Fantastic. And what is your website called?
It's ElizaVanCort.com, and there's no U in court. Everybody puts a U, no U. So it's ElizaVanCort.
And I will make sure that this is in the notes for the website. And finally, your book. When is it launched, and how can people get it?
Well, it is available for, I always feel like I'm one of those telemarketers when I say that. It's available for pre-sale now. But it is available for pre-sale now, and you can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it at Amazon. You can also go to your local bookstore and say you want to reserve a copy. If you do think the book is something that would interest you, the best way to support a book is to get it before the week it comes out, because that tells the sellers that you are a book that they should buy and stock. So definitely always get books. And I did not know this until I did a book, and now I buy it it's great to do it then, or the first week of sales is also important. So those are the two big times that you can really help an author and help get a message out you care about. So yeah, definitely do that and enjoy it. And if you have questions and you get the book, I hope you'll reach out to me, because I love answering questions.
Remember, everybody, we want to support Eliza with this. So order your book before it comes out.
It's in pre-sale now. Everywhere books are sold.
Is there anything else you'd like to anything else you'd like to add, Eliza?
Yeah, one thing I would say is one question I've been getting a lot of lately is, how do we claim space during the pandemic with our communication?
Yes. Yeah, in fact, I'd written that down, all about virtual. Thank you very much.
Yes, it's such a great question. I think it's so important. And I'm going to give just a couple tips, because they're so simple and they're so easy. And some of them seem obvious, but people don't do it. So the first thing is get a ring light. Sounds so
you can see my ring lights here.
Exactly. If you cannot be seen, people are not seeing your face, it's a lot harder to claim space. People can't even tell if you've interrupted. Exactly. She just turned her ring light off and on. You should see my ring light when it goes off, girl. It's not good. So get a ring light. Also, you can get a little microphone, and you can do these for $20.
Yes.
Really, get them on Amazon for cheap. So that's the first thing. Make sure your background is saying what you want it to. There's this hilarious story of, in our country, Sarah Palin was pardoning a chicken, and behind her, they're slaughtering chickens. And so they always say when you're doing any kind of media turnaround, yes, exactly, how you get the wine up there. Turn around and make sure the background is what you want people to see, because all of these things send a message about who you are, and you claim space by telling people, this is who I am. You guys can't see, but right now I'm in front of a door full of signatures where all of my students sign when they graduate. And I always feel like the people I love are with me. Yeah, it's so wonderful. And so that's important. And then the other thing is make sure that you are speaking at least once in every meeting. It's very easy to recede in virtual because people aren't comfortable with this genre. So if you don't have something that you think you want to say, the two things you can do are, one, parrot an idea. And I know that sounds really simple, but people say, well, why should I say something that was said before? Watch, men do it all the time. They'll be like, great job, Bob. That was an awesome point you made. Thanks, Bob. Women do not say, great job, Jane or Bob. We don't do that. We can also tell Bob and Jane they did a good job. And it shows that you're saying, I have the right to say my opinion that I think this is good matters. And then also a question, ask a question. Questions are a really good way to get into a conversation. And I think it's just important that we all claim space by making sure that we are taking our fair share of the space in virtual conversations.
That we are demonstrating we're present.
That's right. Exactly. We're telling people what we think we deserve.
Yes. And if we don't do that, if we don't claim it, we're going to be less visible.
That's right. Well, humans, I have found, will really rise to the level of the marker that you give them. So if you tell people, treat me down here, they'll say, okay. If you say, I want to be up here, I want you to treat me like a queen, people will say, well, I guess this woman thinks that she should be treated like a queen and she seems to believe it. I better do that. And we all know that person who you meet them, you just wouldn't mess with them. Yeah. And that's because they are saying, you can't. I'm in my power. I know my value. You can't mess with me. So I think that's really, really important for us to claim space and let people know, like everyone else, I deserve to claim space.
What a fantastic way to finish. Thank you so much, Eliza. I have really, really enjoyed reading the book, and I have really enjoyed meeting you for this podcast.
Well, this was really so lovely. It really was. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted.
Thank you very much. So everyone, you can understand why I wanted to interview Eliza. Some fantastic takeaways, aren't there? And remember that in the notes for the podcast, I will share some key points from the interview. And remember, if you are interested in being involved in our monthly masterclasses, don't forget to register on superstarcommunicator.com/webinar-interest. Until next time, this is Susan. You have been listening to the Superstar Communicator podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and review the podcast on iTunes and on apps. Please contact us if you want to discuss any topic, could suggest a topic for us to include, or a guest who could come onto the podcast. Go to superstarcommunicator.com.